All right, good morning, everybody. So as promised, I just did the crappy cell phone video showing the behind the scenes of how I record my videos of me using the microscope. So anyways, I'm actually going to do this now. So this was a video I've been meaning to do. I've had some questions about this, and we're going to talk about the different focusing options for the different STEM modes, and what I recommend you do and why you should do it. Okay, so let me go ahead and open the column valves here. So my sample in here is a lacy carbon support film, and it's got some clusters of iron oxide nanoparticles on it, and this will work fine for what we want to do. I mean, ideally we'd have you know, something a little bit flatter in terms of topography to kind of focus on, but you know, this will be fine for what we need to do. So very quickly here, now depending, so the three STEM modes, right, are their nanoprobe STEM, right, and of course we're on the Themis with the CS probe correction, so that's where the probe corrector is working, right, is when we're in nanoprobe. You have microprobe STEM, and then you have LM STEM. Okay, so and all three of those have different nuances in terms of the focusing. Okay, so you can see here, I'll push eucentric focus, and we'll go ahead and minimize our contrast, and that looks good enough right there. Okay, now I've mentioned this before. Okay, so depending on your mode, there's an optimal way to set your monochromator. Okay. I'm not going to go through I'm going to go ahead and center this right now. You can see this is off because I haven't used this in a couple days, which is expected. Okay. So again, if we were in nanoprobe STEM, we'd want this at positive 40. If we were in microprobe or LM, we'd want this at negative 40. Okay. I'm actually, well, you know, when I get to those modes, I'll go ahead and swap it just for, you know, purposes of thoroughness, if you will. So since we're going to start in nanoprobe STEM, I'll go ahead and put this to positive 40. Okay. Now, of course, if you have a system without a monochromator, and of course, we're not filtering right now, but if you have a system without a monochromator, you may have a different gun setting for doing high-res STEM. So usually in that case, you're using a system with a higher gun lens value than you would, you know, for doing like TEM mode, okay, per se. So you may have a different gun setting in, you know, depending on which STEM mode you're in. So, which, you know, again, system dependent, right? So and then the other thing here, so we're going to check the C2 aperture. Now the C2 aperture centering, as I've said many times before, transfers well between the different modes on the microscope. So you go and find your beam settings panel, turn off your C3 lens. Okay, so now your intensity knob is coupled to C2, and we can see that this is already nice and centered. So the centering on this instrument transfers well between the different modes. This is generally not the case with a system without CS correction, I find. So you will, in that case, need to adjust the C2 centering depending on which mode you're in, whether that's TEM, whether that's nanoprobe STEM, whether that's microprobe STEM, whether that's LM STEM. Okay? All right. So at this point, though, we are ready. We want to be in TEM mode here, 3 condenser mode before we go into STEM, though. We are ready to go into STEM mode. Okay, so you're going to find your STEM imaging panel. Now there's 2 options here for this panel. Okay, there's an expert mode and there's a user panel. Okay, so you can see here in the user panel, there's really no difference here. The difference is with the flap outs. So if we expand the flap outs here, okay, so you get some, now the scan tab is not terribly important for what we're doing. This is only relevant, of course, in if you're in TIA, and we generally don't use TIA for acquiring STEM images anymore. But it's this focus tab where you see the differences, okay? So we don't have all the same options here that we do in the user version of this panel that we do in expert, okay? So just FYI, if you're not in the expert version, you're not going to see all of this. So we're going to keep the expert version here, and we're going to go ahead and hit the STEM button, okay? All right, so now let's expand this tab here, and we can talk about now some of these options here, okay? So the first thing is auto eucentric focus. This is checked. What does that mean? It means that when we enter into STEM mode, it's going to automatically put the lenses at the eucentric focus value, okay, and run the normalization, okay? That's what auto eucentric focus checked means. Now, one thing I will also plug here for you, the online help manual does a great job of talking about all of this stuff and what this does, okay? So if you go to help here and main index, and then alphabetical index, and then S, and if you find STEM, here we go, and we want to find, yeah, STEM imaging, okay? So, right, so this is what we're in right now, is the focus control panel, okay? So if you click on this, it does a great job of actually going through all of these and explaining what these are, okay? So anyways, that's what auto eucentric focus does, okay? If I push eucentric focus, let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so that, again, it puts all the lenses back to the eucentric focus value, runs normalization. That's the same exact thing as if I push eucentric focus on my right-hand control panel, okay? If I adjust the, see right now I'm in objective mode, this doesn't really matter. Let me go ahead and do this here, okay? So I'm changing my objective lens very clearly. If I hit reset defocus, that resets this defocus here to 0. It doesn't do anything as far as the actual objective lens is concerned, okay? So this just changes the displayed value of defocus. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push eucentric focus to put this back, and then I'm going to hit reset defocus to put this back to 0. Reset beam, this resets the beam shift. So right now I have diffraction on. Let me mag up here a little higher, and then I'm going to turn diffraction off, and then I'm going to, okay, my detector, STEM detector is not in, which is fine. Switch to HDR mode, okay? So reset beam, this resets the beam shift, okay? So if I click this, okay, that resets the beam shift. So now again, this is not the beam shift inside of S-Core, okay? So I've activated user beam shift here just to show you this, okay? So if I move this around here, whoops, okay, and then if I go back, it shouldn't, okay, so it doesn't do anything. So what it's resetting actually is, if you find direct alignments and click beam shift, okay, now you don't want to do this. You want to do the beam shifting using user beam shift in S-Core, because what you're doing right now is you're exporting elements from the microscope to the corrector, which you don't want to do, which I've been over before. But now, okay, so I activated beam shift, used my multifunction. So now if I come back here, oh, it didn't do it. What's going on? Interesting. Reset beam. It didn't do anything. Let me go back here. Channels. Yeah, so it did change the beam shift, but it didn't actually move this back. If I click this, does it do it? No, it still doesn't do it. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I don't know if that's a glitch or something, but I mean, you saw when I did it initially, it did reset the shift. So anyways, okay. I'm in exported elements in S-Core. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 0 for my beam shift here, because I don't want this to be There we go. It's a little tricky to kind of get it all the way zeroed out. Come on. I'm going to get it. No, come on. Give me positive 0. I know it's an oxymoron. Ah. Okay. All right. I think that's good enough. All right. So that's interesting. I mean, it was supposed to do this. Because, right, if we look here, okay, reset beam. Pressing the reset beam resets the user beam shift setting. As set. Okay, so it's set with the trackball. Okay. All right. So now I think. Okay. So yes. So now the trackball is actually activated for shifting the beam here. I didn't know that. It's interesting here. Now is it actually, but this is not actually exporting any elements. That's very interesting. Huh. Okay, no, it actually, okay, so this is controlling user beam shift. Ah, that's really interesting. Didn't know this. Let me come back here. Is it actually changing this? It's not changing any of this, which is very interesting. Okay, interesting. So if we come back here to channels, and now let's try this again. Let me pull up S-Core so we can watch, and we click reset beam. Yeah, so put all this back to 0. Okay, so anyways, that's what it does. Again, I recommend you don't do that though. What I recommend you do is use user beam shift in here, okay, inside of S-Core. So I'm going to go ahead and recenter this. But that's what reset beam means. I think it would make a little more sense if they put that as like reset beam shift rather than just, resetting the beam. Okay, now we'll get into now that we covered these buttons here, focus window size. So this is only relevant if you're imaging inside of TIA, but when you press focus, right, it's going to pull up a reduced area, and it's going to be 20% of your scan frame. Okay, but this isn't relevant for the rest of the focus. Just to give you, just to cover that base. So, anyways, the real nitty-gritty here, or the real important part of this, is actually these options for the focus. Okay, so if we start with the first one, objective. Okay, if we're on objective, my focus knob controls the objective lens, and my intensity knob does nothing, is completely decoupled, okay? So I'm turning my intensity knob right now, and as you can see, none of my lenses are changing, okay? But if I change my focus knob, you can see, right, very clearly I'm changing my objective lens, okay? Let me go ahead and push eucentric focus here to put everything back. Okay. Let me go ahead here and user beam shift to bring that back in. Okay, let me just take a screen snip of this to make this a little easier. Window snip, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so now that's objective. If we go to intensity, so intensity is actually the first option. So now my intensity knob still does nothing, okay? But my focus knob is now controlling C3. Okay, you can see right there, right? I'm controlling C3 in this case, okay? Intensity knob does nothing, focus knob controls C3. Let me go ahead and push eucentric focus, that puts everything back to where it was. And I'm going to skip over this next one, step size dependent. I'm going to do that one last, and we'll go to intensity and objective. Okay, so if we have intensity and objective, my intensity knob and focus knob are both activated, but the intensity knob controls C3. So I'm turning the intensity knob, and you can see very clearly that's controlling C3. And the focus knob controls the objective. Okay? So you can see very clearly, right? So both of the knobs are activated if you have intensity and objective. I'll go ahead and push eucentric focus. And then we'll talk about the last option here, which is the most interesting one I found when I read about this. Step size dependent. Okay, so you have right here a focus step. Okay, so this goes all the way from 1 to 9. Okay, so what this means is that depending on the step size, the adjustment is made either with the objective or the C3 lens. Okay, so my understanding is that when the step size is smaller, it's using objective. But as the step size gets bigger, it actually transitions to using C3. Okay, so we can test this now. I'm on step 1, right? So you can see what it's doing. It's changing the objective. Okay, it's not changing anything else. If I go to 2, right, so now at 2, it's actually going to C3. And now if I go to 3, so basically only at step 1 is it using objective. Okay, if I go higher than that, it boots automatically to C3. So that's kind of neat that you can control effectively both of these from one knob, right? Because your step 1, right, is dedicated to objective, and then step 2 or higher goes to C3. And realistically, if you're doing, atomic res STEM, like we're going to be doing in nanoprobe mode, you would want to be on step 1 anyway. Okay, so this is kind of a neat option here that I wasn't really aware of. All right, let me go ahead and push eucentric focus here. Put everything back. Okay, so now the $64,000 question: what should I be doing here? Okay, so if we have our lenses set properly, okay, meaning we have the proper objective lens, okay, so the way that if we have the objective lens set properly and we have the caustic spot focused properly with C3, okay, and the way we can check actually is, so we can see, this is probably pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to correct A1 here, course A1 inside of S-Core, just to make this a little easier for us to. Now technically, I don't know if this is actually astigmatism in the probe or just the image of the probe, but that's neither here nor there, okay? But anyways, this is basically what we should be seeing. We're seeing a nice sharp caustic spot here inside of this diffuse halo, okay? We don't need to worry about the fact that this isn't centered. It's not really important at the moment. So if we weren't seeing this, okay, and then now actually we come back over to S-Core and we activate beam tilt, okay? And so if these are set properly, we should see that spot stay centered as we tilt the beam, okay? Which is exactly what we see, okay? So what this tells me is I've got everything set properly, okay? Now obviously your C3 lens value, it in principle shouldn't change with step size, or not step size, with spot size. In practice, what I find is that it can just a little bit. So you kind of have to do this, as needed per se. But if this wasn't the case, so let's say the objective was set properly, but we didn't have a focus probe. Okay, so if we go to beam and we go to the direct alignments panel and we click intensityless focus. So what this does now is it temporarily couples the focus knob to the C3 lens. Okay, so in other words, if I had it's not doing anything. What's going on? Intensityless focus. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, so you can see like now that's clearly not optimal, okay? So if our probe looked like this, and assuming we had the objective lens at the proper eucentric focus value, again, if you're not sure, push eucentric focus, okay? That will, put it back. And then we're going to adjust C3 until we get a nice sharp caustic spot here. So somewhere about here looks pretty good. Okay, again, if I go too far, right, I lose it. Okay, so you want to just start to see so somewhere about in here. Now this is a little bit of a judgment call, obviously, as to where you see this. The camera can also play kind of some tricks on you when you do this. So it usually helps to actually set this at like a fixed value with the histogram so it doesn't like auto update. So right about there looks good. And if I keep going, right, it washes out. So you can really see like right where you start to see it just kind of become a nice sharp spot. This is what you want, okay? And again, click done. That stores the value of C3. So now if I push eucentric focus, if I was to adjust C3, it will go back to this value, okay? Again, provided I'm not doing that with intensity list focus. All right, so let's just make sure here. Oops, activate beam tilt here. Right, and we can see once again, my beam is not shifting while I'm tilting. Now, we don't have a way to directly control the beam tilt pivot points in nanoprobe mode. So, setting the objective lens in this case, this has to be done kind of at the service level. There's a way to do it. It's a little bit more convoluted, but if you run into this problem where you think this is not set to the proper values, I would suggest that you initiate a service call for doing that, because that's what you should be seeing. Okay, you should be seeing the caustic spot stay stationary as you're tilting it. Okay, so now, anyways, back to the stem panel and the focus tab. So what do we want then? We actually want this now. Okay, so obviously, from here, right, we want to do most of our focusing with the stage. Okay, we want to do as much focusing as we can. We do have piezo enhancement on this one, so you really want to make use of that if you can. But then if we have to do any finer focusing beyond that, we want to use objective here, okay? You don't want to, let me put this back here, sorry. You don't want to use C3 for this. You want to use objective. So the question is why, okay? Why would we want to use the objective lens instead of C3? Okay, so I asked this question and to an apps person, and he gave me a very good answer, very technical answer, and explained the situation. But the short answer is the way that the column is set up. We have the condenser lenses, then we have the corrector, and then we have the objective lens. Okay, so by keeping C3 fixed, we keep the crossover of the C3 lens at a fixed position relative to the corrector, okay, if we keep C3 fixed, okay? So then if we make small adjustments to the objective lens, okay, so, and by small, what the person was telling me was plus or minus 100 nanometers, okay? If we do that and the system is well tuned, we're not going to introduce any additional aberrations to the probe, okay? But if we were instead to focus with C3 and keep the objective focus fixed, or keep the objective lens fixed, the problem with that is we would introduce higher order aberrations into the probe, okay, because we no longer would be keeping the crossover of the C3 lens at a fixed position relative to the corrector, okay, without going into the nitty-gritty details. So again, just to summarize, right, provided you have your objective lens set properly and your C3 lens properly focused, okay, like we do here. If we wanted to make any finer adjustments to the focus when we're imaging, we would want to do it with the objective, okay? So just to, show this, right, let's go ahead and turn diffraction on. Okay, and I'll go to Velox here, and we'll start HADF. Okay, let me go ahead and boost my gain. And get rid of this. Okay, so we can see very clearly, right, that this image is out of focus. Okay, so we want to, again, we want to do the most focusing we can with the stage. Okay, so I'm going up here to get the focus as good as I can get it. Let me switch this. Now, this is a little, there's some topography with this, and of course our depth of field is not very high when we're in nanoprobe mode. Okay, so let me see if I can't get this any better. Yeah, right about there. Whoops, and that's a little worse. So here's where, again, make use of your piezo enhancement if you have it. Okay, so over here, I actually have my multifunction Y set for piezo move Z. Okay. The other way, of course, let me boost this gamma here. All right, let me move actually over some of the support film because this is going to be easier to see this way. Crosshair, center beam. Okay, and then if we stop and we go back here, and we'll switch to high resolution mode and natural mode. Okay, and I'm using my multifunction Y, which is piezo move Z. Okay, so you can see, right, I'm going away from the blow up condition. Now I'm coming towards the blow up condition, and you can see right about there. Now there's clearly some aberrations in here, right? I've got some axial comma/coma, which I'm not going to correct, but this is the point, right? Is you can fine tune this not just by looking at the image, but by looking at the Röntgengram by trying to obtain the quote blow up condition. Now the range of motion here for the piezo. Okay, so we're at Z 7.1 or Z. Sorry. Let me reset this. Okay, we're at 4.7 microns. So let's see what the limit here is as far as the piezo. So when we go to 100%, okay, so this basically gives us about 600 nanometers of Z. Okay, so plus or minus 600 nanometers of Z. Okay, so yeah, right about there. And again, I know we've got some axial comma, but I mean that's close enough for what we need to do. Actually, we got pretty good just by using the normal stage Z. Okay. Now again, if I keep going negative, right, I again start to see the sample. So actually, this is just a little aside here. Let's find the edge. See if I can find the edge of the film here. And actually, I'm going to let me turn on the screen markings. And where are we? Come on, direct alignments, diffraction alignments. I'm going to put in the biggest C2 aperture here because it's going to make this easier to show. But I'm going to show you a little tip here for how to know which way to adjust your stage depending on the image you see in the Röntgengram. Let me pull out the HADIF detector for a moment. Okay, so this looks reasonably well centered. Okay, so now look, okay, right here you can see if you look at the image in the Röntgengram, this is vacuum, this is your support film. You see very clearly on the edge here, that's a dark fringe. Okay, so the image in our Röntgengram is over-focused. Okay, what this means is that we actually want to bring the stage up to get the stem image focused to obtain the blow-up condition. Okay, so this is actually different from what we do when we're in TEM mode. When we're in TEM mode and we have an over-focused image, we actually want to bring the stage down. Okay, but we're not in TEM mode, we're in STEM mode. Okay, so this can actually be explained using some ray diagrams and using what's called the principle of reciprocity without going into all the nitty-gritty. But if you don't believe me, right, very clearly we're seeing let me switch to linear because it's going to be a little easy. Yeah, so you can really see it right there. So, and there's this burn mark in the center to try to ignore that. But you can see very clearly, right, we have overfocus here. So now watch Z here, okay, or watch it here. I'm going to increase it. Oh, no, I'm moving the aperture still. No. Let me go ahead here. Okay. So now I have this back to piezo move Z. All right, so you can see here my Z is going up, and we are very clearly getting close to the blow-up condition. And boom, right about there. Okay, now again, right, we've got some axial comma there, but this is close enough, right, to get us into focus. Okay, but that's just a little bit of an aside there. Okay, let's go ahead and correct this just for the fun of it here, since we have it. Turn on probe B2. Sorry, we'll move this over here. Okay, I'm using my focus ring to change the strength of the pulsing, and then we'll adjust A2, B2 on step 9. Okay, your left and right arrows control up and down movement, right? Just like you would expect. Okay, a little bit off there. Now there's definitely some A2 still present here. That looks close enough here. All right, let me go ahead here. We'll go back to A2. We're trying to get, okay, that's a little better. And now I'm going to go back to piezo move Z here, get us closer. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. Go back to probe B2. Okay, yeah, and that looks decent there. Better than it was, right? I mean, obviously, it just didn't look good. But yeah, I mean, that's perfect right there. You have a nice blow-up condition here. And again, we didn't mess with the objective at all, okay? We did this entirely by manipulating just the stage Z, okay? So let me go ahead and put the 70 micron condenser back in. So what this is telling me is that a lot of that astigmatism I was seeing in the image of the probe was probably some objective astigmatism. So actually what we can do now to rectify this is I'm going to turn diffraction off, and we can fix the image here with objective. Switch to natural. Okay, so now I have objective that I'm using to correct this. HDR. Okay, there we go. All right, and again, don't worry about this being off-centered here. So that's a separate video I wanted to do about actually the pre-corrector tilt. So this is again just going over the focusing options here. Okay. All right. So now this is, of course, this is probe mode or nanoprobe mode. Okay. So now we can talk about the other modes here. All right. So now if we wanted to go, let's talk about first microprobe. Okay. So again, find your beam settings panel, go to free control, and then you can switch your mini condenser to microprobe. Okay. Now it will remember the spot size that you were last using in microprobe. So in that case, I was at 5. It doesn't transfer the spot numbers between the modes. So let me put this back to, I'll put this at 9, so we're using the same spot number. It's running normalization. And let me take out, okay, I don't have the HADF detector in, so we need to chase the beam. Now again, when we're in microprobe mode, we don't need to use S-core, okay? We can do everything through the UI. Let's click beam shift here. Click natural. Okay, so now if we go back to the stem panel and the focus tab, you'll notice now I am locked out of everything except for one option for focus, which is intensity. Okay, so on this system, you don't have a choice. Once you enter into microprobe mode, you can only focus using C3. Okay, right? See right there? Okay, so there's no option to actually do this with the objective. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead here because, as I said before, for purposes of thoroughness, we probably would want to use a different setting for the monochromator in microprobe because we have the same objective and mini condenser as if we were in TEM mode. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go all the way to -40. Down more. Okay, that looks reasonable. All right, we'll put this at -40. All right, and there we go. Okay. Oops. So now again, if I spread the beam out with the focus knob, my intensity knob does nothing now, okay? If I spread the beam out with my focus knob, I can see a TEM image here. All right, so now one of the things, and you can use the trackball here, that's fine. So again, if you look at the, actually before we get into that, okay, so now what we need to do here, so just like we did in nanoprobe mode, we need to focus our probe to a point, okay? So you can find direct alignments, intensity list focus, and you want to focus this to as sharp a point as you can make. Doesn't look like we really have much astigmatism here, so that's fine. Again, I'm not going to worry about any of the other alignments right now. Well, I guess if we want to, let's go ahead and do this here. Okay, so as far as the rotation center here, you can use rotation. So it's actually easier to do this with the rotation center objective here, and you're just trying to minimize shifting of the image here, just like you were in TEM mode. It's a little tricky to do this with the rotation center intensity. Okay, so it's actually a lot easier, in my opinion, to do this with just looking at the image itself here, or the TEM image. So, all right, so we need something here. Now I think there was some. Okay, so we got some particles over here. Okay, there we go. So we're trying to minimize the shifting of the image. Okay, that looks good right there. Okay, so now click done. Okay, let me come over here. Mag up as high as we can, and then intensity list focus. Oops, where'd my beam go? There we go. And make this as small a point as possible, okay? And there we go. Okay, so now this stores C3 for eucentric focus, okay? So if I push eucentric focus again, it's going to put C3 back to whatever this value is. So now as far as focusing, same idea as before. We want to focus as much as we can with the height, okay? Now if we were in TEM mode and we had the height set properly and then we went directly into microprobe stem, we should already be good with the height, but because we were in nanoprobe and we switched into microprobe, that's probably not going to be the case. So actually one way you can tell is if we spread the beam out here, so we can actually see an image of the sample. Okay, so if you actually look at the edge of the particles, it's a little noisy because the current's low, but you can see I have an over-focused image here, okay? I have a dark fringe on the side of the support film and along the sides of the nanoparticles, okay? But now this is an actual image, okay? We're not looking at the ronchigram. So in this case, we actually would want to move the stage down, okay? We want to move the stage down and we want to get that minimum contrast criterion, okay? So I'm going to go down with the stage. Okay, you can see, right, the fringe is going away. Now if I keep going, right, start to see a light fringe, okay? So we just want to adjust this till we see that fringe kind of barely go away. Okay, now your depth of field is going to be a lot higher in microprobe mode. And now at this point, you can just, if you push intensityless focus, it should put this back to the same value, or you could just do eucentric focus again. But now let's go ahead and turn diffraction on. Okay, and we'll start the scan. All right, so let's bring this down. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, so now in microprobe, your resolution is not going to be nearly as good as is the case for nanoprobe, okay? But your advantage is that you have a much higher depth of field because your semi-angle of convergence is a lot smaller, okay? So we can see if we can get this any better by looking at or by adjusting the stage Z. So you can actually see here, right? Okay, that's getting blurrier. Okay, that looks pretty close right there. Now if I keep going down, it starts to get blurry again. So now, again, your depth of field is a lot higher, so you're not going to see the changes in image, the change in focus as dramatically as you would in nanoprobe mode, okay? So again, you know, this is, you got to just get this kind of in the ballpark here, okay? All right, that's pretty good. Now if we mag in here, so now the rest of the adjustments we can make with the focus knob. Okay, so if I put this on step 3, right, so we can see that's my optimal focus. Oh, I have intensityless focus still set here. Whoops. Hold on a second. Let me push eucentric focus here. Didn't realize I had that set. All right, let me go back here for a second. All right, let me stop this. Okay. Take out my stem detector. Okay. All right, let's beam shift this to the middle. Okay, intensityless focus. All right, there's a little bit of astigmatism, so I'm going to activate condenser here. And again, we can make the final tweak looking at the actual picture, but that should be good enough here. Then when I deactivate that, it should go back, well, because that was the multi-function and not the focus knob, so those are all activated at once. Again, keep this fixed. Right about there. Okay, looks good. All right. Okay, so now let's go back to diffraction. And we'll start the scan again. Okay, so it actually looks like we're pretty good here, okay? So we can see here, if I adjust the defocus, okay, so right about there, looks pretty good. So I'm only a few tens of nanometers deviated from from my default C3 lens in terms of the defocus, okay, which is fine. Okay. Now again, we don't have the same issues here to worry about because we're really not using the corrector effectively because our convergence angle is so small. We're in a regime because the angle is very small. This is, again, I've measured this. It's about 3 millirad. Okay, and in that case, you are completely, let me put this off here. You are diffraction limited in terms of your resolution, okay? So you're not really gaining anything or using the corrector in any meaningful sense, okay? You don't have anything to worry about in terms of higher order aberrations at that point, or even the effect of just normal third order spherical aberration, okay? Your convergence angle is that small. Let me go ahead and align this here. We can get this. But anyways, I've actually measured this, the default angle here, and it's actually, what does it say here? It says it's about 1.5. It's actually about 3 when I actually measured it. So just kind of FYI, okay? All right. But we don't have to worry about like the issue, well, we adjusted C3, if in nanoprobe that was going to introduce higher order aberration. We don't have to worry about that in this case, okay? It's a completely different scenario. All right, so the last scenario to worry about is LM stem, okay? So let me move over here for a moment, kind of away from everything, and I'll stop the beam, okay? So now, you can enter LM stem from either microprobe or nanoprobe stem. It's better to access it from nanoprobe though, because if you access it from microprobe, then you are limited in terms of your focusing option to just intensity, okay? So I'll prove this to you to show you, okay? So I'm magging down, okay, and then I go into LM stem. Now you can see, once I go into LM stem from microprobe, right, my focus here is again locked into just intensity, okay? So I'm going to go back to microprobe. Okay, and then I'm going to go to beam settings, and then I'm going to click probe to put me back into nanoprobe. It's going to run normalization. Okay, and now when I mag down into LM stem, it should continue to give me all of these options here. Yes, and it absolutely does. Okay, so this just gives you a little bit more flexibility. Again, I'll go over this. What the best way to do this is. All right, so let's go ahead and turn diffraction off here. Take out the detector. Okay, beam shift. Okay, so if we're not planning to do any kind of tweaking, now what's interesting here, did it remember the spot number from last? It did, right? Because we were at 9 before, and it went to 7. So it remembers whatever spot you had when you were in LM stem, okay, before, which is interesting, okay? All right, so now, if the objective lens becomes very weak when you're in LM stem, okay? So this is the same value that it's at when we do LM TEM mode. So if you don't want to change this, if you're fine with leaving this as is, I would just take your focus here and put it on intensity, okay? Again, our convergence angle is very small. It's actually much smaller than it is even in stem microprobe. And so we're perfectly fine by just using C3 here, okay? But if we want to drive this to 0, right, because we're going to do something like a DPC experiment and we don't want to have a magnetic field that, wipes out the magnetic domains in our sample, we would want to actually put this on intensity and objective. So let's leave it on intensity and objective for the moment. And now my intensity knob is controlling C3, which you can see here. Okay, and so, whoops, I was trying to use the trackball. That was pretty coarse, actually. Okay, so my multifunctions, if I go to beam shift, are giving me a little more control. All right, so let's go ahead and now -40 is fine for doing LM stem, but we're probably going to have to adjust the shift a little bit here. Okay, there we go. Okay, now this is the highest mag we can go in LM stem mode. Now, as far as the focusing with this, you really want to be at mechanical eucentric for this. Okay, so what we can do here is we should be pretty close because we were just in stem microprobe, which is again the same condenser setting as in TEM. But if we find stage and then wobble, okay, so you can see we're really not moving. So we're basically at mechanical eucentric, so we're fine there. Okay, and we can go ahead here. So I went over alignment with this, so I'm not going to go over that again. But now, right, we can, if we want to turn off the objective lens, use your focus knob, okay, and let's drive this all the way to 0. You don't have to do this again if you're not working on a magnetic sample and you're trying to do like a DPC experiment. This is not necessary, but you can do this obviously here. Come on. There we go. Okay, so now what I found here is that if we now reset the defocus because we messed with objective, okay, and then we switch this to intensity. So now my focus knob controls C3 and my objective lens is set to whatever it was set at before, okay? So that's perfect, okay? So now we don't have to worry about any of this. Now we can reset this again when we come here to, let me go to high resolution mode here, intensity list focus, okay? Now actually what we can do, because we fudged with the, because we fudged with the objective, our rotation center is going to be off here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, that looks good right there. All right. So then intensity list focus. Again, we'll lock this in here. Okay, let me switch to natural actually. We'll lock this in here. Okay, maybe a little astigmatism, so we'll activate condenser stig. There we go. Get the same shape on crossover. Okay, right about there. Done. Okay, and now we can reset the defocus. So we come back here and just click reset defocus. Oh, what happened? Wait a second. This went back. What's going on? All right, let's figure this out here. Pain in the butt. All right, intensity. put this back to 0. Reset intensity. Okay, so why did it put the objective back? Was it because I turned on rotation center? No, the rotation center is still there. Okay, so it didn't change that. Let's see if we can figure this out here. Okay, that looks good right there. Okay, so now it's still there. So now why? Okay, if we go to intensity list focus. Okay, so that's what's doing it. If I go to intensity list focus, then it's putting this back. Okay, so yes, so unfortunately, you can't use this, at least if you're driving the objective. Now we can reset the focus, but we can't go back to intensity list focus. So anyways, all right, let's do this one more time since we're already here. You always learn little extra quirks about the microscopes every time you use them. Okay. Intensity, reset. Again, if we weren't messing with the objective, we could just leave this on intensity to begin with and not worry about driving that. But I'm just showing you this for. Okay, that looks good. All right. So now we can't use intensity list focus, but we can focus our probe as small as we can make it, and then we can come over here and just reset defocus. There we go. Okay, so that kept everything the same. All right, so let's go back to acquisition. Okay, so then your final astigmatism correction has to be done. Why is my mag knob not working? Oops. Oh, because I need to turn diffraction on. There we go. Duh. Okay, there we go. All right, so your final correction of astigmatism should be done with the image, of course. Where's our cluster of particles over here? Yeah, so I can see very clearly we have some. Okay, that looks fairly reasonable. Okay, there we go. There we go. Seeing the same as we go back and forth. Perfect. Okay. All right, there we go. All right. So that's the skinny here on your different focusing options here in STEM and why you should be doing, what you should be doing. Okay, so we covered everything here. So again, just to summarize, right, in nanoprobe, I would use objective, again, provided all your other lenses are set properly. In microprobe, we'd want to just use intensity because it's locking us into that anyway. And then if you're in LM mode and you enter it from nanoprobe, you do have all of these options available to you. But the best thing to do is, again, if you don't care about the objective lens, just put it on intensity, okay? But if you do want to use objective or drive the objective to 0, you can do intensity and objective, drive the objective to 0, then reset the defocus, and then switch to intensity, and it will keep the objective lens setting to where you have. But then what you want to make sure you don't do is come back here and push intensity-less focused. Okay? Because if you do that, it's going to put the objective back to the eucentric focus value in LM mode, which was that 4.2 whatever percent. Okay? All right. But you can still see, even, I don't know if there's any difference here. We could actually take an image here just, for the fun of it, because I'm actually kind of curious now that we're here. Let's see if there's really much difference in terms of the image quality here between LM stem with the objective off and LM stem with the objective on. Okay, so we'll go ahead here. I doubt it's going to be very, very dramatic. All right, just quick and dirty here. Diffraction off. Okay, so now I'm going to put this back to, well, just a quick way to do this, right, is just push intensity-less focus, and there you go, okay? And then I'm going to push eucentric focus here to run normalization, because we did put this back to where it was before, and then I'll just leave this on intensity like it is now. Whoops. Take the detector out. All right, let's realign the rotation center because that's going to be off. Okay, looks good. Okay, intensity-less focus. Now we might be seeing some, because we turned the objective back on, we're seeing some additional, now I'm not sure, we'll have to restigmate when we actually look at the image. It's possible that what we're seeing here is just objective astigmatism, so it is actually technically diffraction. Okay, that's good enough there. Okay, we can reset our defocus. Diffraction back on. This was at 17.9K. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so yeah, there's still some astigmatism here, so just fine. That looks pretty good right there. Again, our defocus, again, very small, right? So these particles aren't very big, but it's tough to resolve these in LM mode. Okay, I don't remember exactly how big these are. I could pull up a higher res image here so we could see, but this is with the objective at 4.2357%, and the other one is with the objective at 0%. So do we even see any difference? Let's take a look and see. Yeah, I really don't think there's really any noticeable difference there. So yeah, just one other neat thing to learn. All right, so let's put this back together, so to speak. Let me move off of the particles here. All right, and then now again, right, if we mag back up here, it doesn't separate these pull down lists between the modes, okay? So if we have this on intensity, when we switch back into nanoprobe, it's going to keep it on intensity. So you have to switch it back accordingly, okay? You can see the difference in the resolution, of course. All right, but you have to put this back to where you want it, okay? It doesn't just go back to, unfortunately, it doesn't remember this. It would be nice if it did, but it doesn't, okay? And again, right, if we wanted to do this, we'd want to put the monochromator back to positive 40, but I'm not going to worry about that now. That was what I wanted to show, so I'm going to go ahead and call it quits here for today. I got some stuff to do on the dual beam, but this was a video I'd been meaning to do. I did it once before and I wasn't satisfied with the result. There was some stuff I wanted to include which I didn't end up remembering to include. So, but I finally got to doing it. All right. So that's the video for the end of the week. I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you again very soon.